views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
Coming up on this edition of Today's Verdict, we'll discuss one of the forms of discrimination that has been in every form in media in the last 2 weeks, sexual harassment. After that, going through the adoption process can be very challenging. A same-sex couple may face even greater hurdles that will be discussed on tonight's show. As you can see, we have much to get to, so stay tuned. Today's Verdict starts right now. All right, hello and welcome to Today's Verdict, the live and interactive show that gives you your legal rights and options. I'm your host and trial attorney, David Lesch. Well, Today's Verdict is always encouraging you to stay connected. Make sure to tweet us at Today's Verdict and hashtag Ask Today's Verdict if you have a question. Also, make sure to like us and follow us on Facebook at Today's Verdict and check us out at bronxnet.tv/BronxLegal. And last but certainly not least, don't forget to tweet me at David Lesch. Sexual harassment is an unwelcome sexual request that can vary from verbal to physical conduct. We'll discuss more with attorney Susan Salazar. Susan, I know I just mentioned to you the book, The Tipping Point. I feel we're really at a tipping point because every time I turn on the news or look at the internet, there seems to be another individual who's being accused of sexual harassment. Initially, what are your thoughts to what you've been witnessing the last month and a half?
So I recently have begun to receive a number of calls from both employers and employees. Employers seeking to train their staffs in sex harassment and implement procedures or remind their staff members of procedures to follow to prevent sex harassment in the workplace.
Do you think it's directly related to what we've been seeing on the television?
I attribute it to that, sure. There's definitely been an uptick in it, and it seemed like things were a little quiet in that area, at least for my firm, for a while. Inquiries on the employee side regarding what to do and complaints of sex harassment, well, they've always trickled in. I think two have been on the uptick within the last month or so.
Now, are you generally representing employees, employers, both? What's your
I represent both sides. We
do.
started out as plaintiff's side, but within the last 5-10 years, it's both sides now.
Okay. Sexual harassment. Let's get down to the very basic. We're in law school here. What is sexual harassment? Would you really define it?
So it's really an unwanted sexual advance. It could be physical, does not have to be. Could be a gesture, could be leering, could be sucking sounds and noises. The key is unwanted. And
does there have to be an intent there? In other words, so the viewer understands, does it have to be an intent on the person who's doing it, that they're intending to cause some type of discomfort to you or knowing that they will?
Yes. Absolutely not. Not necessarily. In fact, many harassers believe that their advances are harmless.
Are welcome.
They're teasing, are welcome.
But they're not.
They're playful, and they are not. And that's the purpose of good sex harassment training, to educate the unknowing.
All right, let's talk about the training. What type of training do people get? Let's talk about it from, let's say, the employer side, really. I mean, that's where the training is. So
okay.
How do you train? What do you train?
So there are a couple phases to it, a couple parts to it. Employers should be aware, one, that really this type of joking in the workplace is an event that really shouldn't happen. It should not be tolerated. So employers need to be trained, one, in what their exposure is, what the possible cost to their business is for a sex harassment claim, whether the complainant is successful or not, and they need to be aware that they need to have good policies in place and management in particular needs to know what to do when they become aware of a complaint.
Now, the training itself, when you own a business, let's say, and it falls on you, do you usually have these training at someplace else? Does somebody come into your office and sit down with your employees? How do you generally
So I've done both. You can, depending on the size of the employer, the type of business that it is, they may prefer that you train right on premises. I generally prefer to have them come to my office where they're free and away from the workplace. I want them to be relaxed. I want them to not be worried about a phone ringing or something they need to attend to, and focus on the training itself.
Do you give examples of, you know, a sucking sound is, waving your hand might not be? Like, do you go through that kind
This
of?
is usually for me, a PowerPoint, can be other ways, and I like to run a test first and give examples, real life examples of things that have occurred in the workplace. Jim asks Mary out the first time, she says no. He's sure if he continues to ask her out,
She'll say yes.
she's eventually just going to say yes. You know, and then I'll ask maybe true, false, or multiple choice questions to see where people are at in their knowledge.
You know, years back when I was single, I remember you would be told by individuals, well, you know, 40% of people that get married a lot of times meet through the work environment. So you're thinking, well, 40% of the people are somehow networking at work, but yet it's not a place where you're in a dating field. People have to understand that.
Right.
And I think it's that line that's drawn that certainly right now, everyone from movie producers to politicians are seeing that there's a power here that you can't exert on your employee.
That's right. That's right.
Where are we going with this? Is what I'm asking you, really.
So I think that it is certainly problematic. Dating in the workplace, it's reality. It happens. It's where people meet each other. But I think the key is unwelcome. And
It's such a gray line sometimes. I know you say no, it's not. But sometimes, you know, you figure, well, let me ask this person out again. They said no the first time. Maybe they were dating somebody and I heard they're not. So I'll ask again. Now that person says, well, no, you've asked me once already. I'm filing a complaint.
yeah,
You know, what do you do?
I'd say leave them alone.
Leave them alone.
I'd say ask that first time, and if you were told no, I would say tell the person all well and good. I respect your decision. If you change your mind.
Okay, let's take it from the employee point of view now. You have an employee who feels he or she, because a man could absolutely be sexually harassed too, correct?
Absolutely.
Right. So what does the employee do upon feeling the discomfort of being sexually harassed? What's the first thing they do?
The first thing I would advise they do is tell the person, leave me alone, or thank you, I'm not interested, depending on what has just occurred. If
Merely walking
there's-
away isn't enough.
I think that, well, walking away could very well indicate that the advance was unwanted.
Okay, so that's something, but certainly don't encourage the behavior, obviously.
You know, sometimes women in particular have been so fearful of that advance or what could occur in the workplace with respect to their career that sometimes they felt they had to smile or patiently try to tolerate it and it would go away. But I advise whoever it is, could be men or women, make it clear, you know, no thank you, no, I don't joke that way, I'm here to work, but make it clear.
Okay, now I guess some employers have HR departments. Do you file a complaint immediately? Do you just send a little email off to your supervisor? What's the next thing you do?
Right. So if you're beginning to feel uncomfortable because the harasser has not left you alone and has continued to come back, I would go to HR. I would first check for an employee handbook or a policy manual. Most employers have them, and employers should have a sex harassment policy in place.
But let me stop you for a second. Even if they don't have a sexual harassment policy in place, if they're violating what would be considered state or federal law, they're still on the hook. Am I correct?
Absolutely.
So what is the policy, what does that booklet do for you, really?
Okay, so the booklet is supposed to tell you, as employee, where to go if you believe you're being harassed. And it should give you a way, God forbid, but if your harasser is a supervisor, someone in management who is above you, it should give you a way or someone else that you can safely go to report the harassment.
All right, so now we're ready for a lawsuit, okay? Because that's why we're here. How do you do that?
Okay. So you really can't go directly into federal court with a claim. You have to first file at the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. And you have to give them the opportunity to take your complaint and investigate.
Do you have to file that within a certain amount of time?
You have, in the state of New York, 300 days to file a complaint.
With the EEOC?
With the EEOC.
All right.
And you have to give them the opportunity to investigate. If the complaint has been at the agency, the EEOC, for 180 days, you can say, I've had enough of this, or no, I'm going to let it continue. But at the end of 180 days, you can request that the EEOC give you, it's called a right to sue letter.
All right.
You can take it out of the agency and you can file your complaint
And
in
what kind of
federal
damages
court.
are you looking for here?
So it's various things. Often it depends on what's happened to you. Let's say you felt you couldn't tolerate what was occurring anymore and you left your job. Or let's say you did not submit to the advances of a supervisor and were fired or terminated. So your lost wages, your back pay is often what you'd look for. If you had to go into therapy, see a psychiatrist, speak to someone about the emotional.
Okay. Well, let's say they want to speak to you. Where do they find you?
The firm is Raff & Becker,
Okay.
LLP, and the number is 212-732-5400.
And you'll come back?
In a moment.
All right, it's nice to have you. All right, we have to take a quick break, but don't worry, we'll be back with more Today's Verdict right after this.
How can I help my daughter with her reading?
Searching for help with Dachshund reading.
No.
Let me try. Sarah's bright, but when she's reading, she has trouble sounding out words.
Playing world music.
What?
I give up.
Wait, I was trying to show you how Sarah feels every day. Frustrating, isn't it? Redirecting to understood.org.
Join parents and experts at understood.org, a free online resource about learning and attention issues to help your child thrive.
Welcome back to Today's Verdict. I'm your host, David Lesch. We are always encouraging you to stay connected. Tweet us at Today's Verdict. Adopting a child can be difficult. If it's a same-sex couple, the challenge is even greater. We'll learn more with our attorney, Clifford Greenberg. Hi, Cliff.
How are you?
My notes tell me that there are many different types of adoptions. Why don't you tell us, because I'm a little confused.
Yes, we do foster care. Private independent, meaning you're finding a child, and like the movie Juno, which people might have seen.
Okay.
Private agency adoption, international. There is step-parent and also adult adoption.
All right, so many different types.
Yes.
Let's talk a little about same-sex adoption. You don't hear too much of it, but now that we're allowing couples to get married and they want to start a family, you have a couple that's watching right now. How do you even begin the process?
There's a lot of good news, and it happens to be National Adoption Month, so I'll
There you
bring
go.
some good news.
All right.
Foster care agencies are incredibly excited about same-sex couples adopting. I do so many of them, so that's great news. Private, there are stories saying that birth moms who are giving birth, or expectant moms, are actually actively looking for same-sex
Now, why
couples.
is that?
Anecdotally, they think it's great that same-sex couples can adopt. They're helping that cause. This is coming from people who told me these things. And they just think it's good that finally they're able to
We're able
adopt.
to do that. That's wonderful.
It's a good story.
All right, so let's say you get a foster care agency looking to have some of their children placed with a same-sex couple. How do they begin the process? Petitions? Which court? I mean, how does that even work? All right.
So all couples who want to adopt become certified foster parents with a specific agency. They go through MAP training, they call it.
Right.
They get trained, they get a child or children placed in their home, and after a certain period of time, they will be able to adopt the child or the children after they're freed for adoption in court.
And what's this process? How long does it take?
If the child is in their home 15 months out of the first 22 in foster care, the agency can bring an action to terminate the parental rights, thereby freeing the child.
Well, let's talk about that, because there obviously are, or there is sometime a parent that has custody, also known as parental rights.
Correct.
What does that mean?
It means that when a child comes into foster care, the agency is mandated to try to work with the birth parents for a certain period of time. Every case is different, every case is fact specific. If there comes a point in time where the agency feels the child has been in care for X number of months and the birth parents have not done that which they needed to do in order to get the child back into their care, the agency can move to terminate parental rights.
And after how long does this process usually take?
It could be the first 15 months out of the 22.
Really?
If a child is in somebody's home 15 months out of the first 22 in foster care, the agency can bring a case to terminate parental rights.
Do they sometimes go hand in hand? In other words, there's an action to terminate someone's parental rights at the same time as the petition to have the adoption?
Chicken and egg. The chicken being it has to happen. A child has to be freed first in order to have the adoption. But sometimes a birth parent can decide that he or she feels it's best for the child to stay with the foster, now adoptive parent, and voluntarily surrender his or her rights.
By the way, so when we're
in court.
talking about foster care at this point, a lot of times you're talking about children who are really talking and speaking
Absolutely.
and are engaged.
Absolutely.
Do they have a say here? I mean,
They do.
I mean, do they get to say, I don't want to go with a couple that's the same sex, or that's not how I know it? I mean, does a judge look at that, or does the judge say it's not up to you,
Never heard
Johnny?
of that one.
Okay.
But Johnny has a say depending on his age, his maturity level. At the age of 14, a child must consent to an adoption.
All right.
I've done thousands. I've never had a child not consent.
Really?
But it could happen. It must happen.
Well, the child wants to be adopted, I would assume.
Child wants to be adopted, wants permanency. There's no such thing as languishing in foster care. Either a child is going to go home to his birth parents, or, which is what I do, be adopted by the adoptive parents.
All right. There are other types of adoptions. Let's talk about a few of the other ones that you see besides same-sex. What other kind of adoptions have you been seeing?
There are lots of step-parent adoptions. Couple is or isn't married, and they split up. Usually the birth mother keeps the child at home and gets married
To somebody else.
to somebody else.
And now
that person petitions for a step-parent adoption.
Okay. Now, what happens when they don't work out as a couple?
Anything can happen. But if they adopt together,
Right.
and then they get divorced, the father is, of course, on the line for child
Well, I guess what I'm
support.
trying to ask you is the parental rights that the stepfather now has, or the stepmother, that they've just because they've adopted, if they split up, they keep those parental rights.
Correct, unless they're also terminated or they voluntarily surrender their rights for another person to adopt.
All right, let's talk about a few other things here because I mean this is just a fascinating subject. When we talk about legal parentage, is that just the encompassing legal term for parental rights, or is there more to it really?
It is. It's parental rights that everybody who is a parent is the legal parent to that child, whether it's a birth situation or an adoption situation. So if you adopt, you are legally the parent to the child. I wrote a book many years ago called My Grandma is My New Mommy. By virtue of the birth parent's parental rights being terminated,
They're the mother.
the grandma
Becomes the
who has
mom.
adopted becomes a legal mother.
And that's completely normal.
Happens all the time.
All right. Well, we're in our little bubble here in New York, but let's kind of go outside. Let's go nationally. What's going on with the rest of the country? Are we ahead of the curve, behind the curve, something else?
We're in New York. You can adopt.
Makes us great.
It makes us great. You can adopt no matter color, religion, sexual orientation in many parts of the country. One of the reasons, the good things, going back to LGBT, there was a decision in Ohio, Obergefell versus Hodges. Same-sex marriage is recognized everywhere. But same-sex couples are still not required, but recommended, all the adoption professionals, that they do a same-sex / second parent adoption just in case. Just in case what?
Why is that?
What if they go to Mississippi or
Okay.
Texas? And it's just not viewed the same way. Birth certificate is not definitive for parentage, only an adoption decree, which is given full faith and credit in all states. So it's very, very belt and suspenders in that sense.
The issues and concerns that many people have with respect to adoption isn't only, same sex, or there are feelings on boy, girl, that kind of, boy, boy, girl, girl, but it's religion.
Yes.
You have somebody who's been brought up a particular religion in foster care, and now these two people who want to adopt are a different religion. How does the judge view that?
The judge doesn't, I've never heard a judge ask. A birth parent could ask a prospective adoptive parent, what religion are you? And they have the power to make the decision to either say, yes, I want this couple to adopt, or not. If I'm doing an agency adoption or a foster care adoption, oftentimes there was no given birth religion. And in the home study, which paints the picture of this adoptive home, it'll say what religion the child is
What
going
does
to
that
be.
mean? What's a home study?
A home study is done by a certified social worker, no matter what kind of adoption I'm doing, basically painting the picture for the judge. He doesn't know the Smith family or the Martinez family. But for reading this 23-page sometimes document, which is the home study for all kinds of adoptions.
Okay, well, let's be fair. Let's also discuss something. Children in foster care sometimes have issues that unfortunately are not their fault, but they've lost parents for certain reasons, drugs, alcohol, death, could be a variety of reasons, and they're in a foster care home or area, and listen, it's not always the greatest solution, but it's the only solution.
Yes.
How can you, as a prospective adopting parent, find out everything you need to know about a potential child?
Really good question. In a foster care situation, the agency is mandated to share with you what they know, obviously not what they don't know. And in my office, when they're signing the papers, one document is an affidavit of medical history saying that the agency did in fact share this information.
That includes criminal behavior or anything else regarding the children?
Criminal behavior, all parties who adopt or anyone 18 or over in the home needs to get fingerprinted. Everything that needs to be there, SCRs, which means has someone ever been accused of neglect or abuse? That's in the home study and in the adoption file itself. A judge doesn't want to sign off on an adoption unless he or she is convinced that this adoptive family is the right one and a safe place for the child.
Have you seen these adoptions taken apart? In other words, two people adopt Johnny, and it turns out that this adoption was not what was supposed to be. The two same-sex, or not even same-sex, just don't seem to be taking care of Johnny.
It's a good question. I get phone calls, how do I undo the adoption?
So you do get that.
Once in a while, once
This
a year or
happens.
so,
Listen,
it does happen.
let's be honest,
You
it happens.
You can place a child voluntarily back into foster care, what I suggest is try counseling, try therapy, try everything so that that doesn't have to happen. Could it happen? It's never happened on any of my cases.
It hasn't happened in your cases.
But I'm quite sure it has happened.
Okay, let's give some tips to someone who's watching right now. They're taking a look. They say, Cliff, I may want to adopt a child with my partner. What do I do?
Do it. It's the ultimate act of love. It's wonderful whether you do it for foster care or private, same-sex, adult adoption. You are literally opening up your heart and your home to children in need.
And you know what, a lot of people say, well, does it cost me a lot of money to do this? I mean, forget about taking care of a child, but how do I file the papers and get the money that's necessary to adopt Johnny?
Again, it depends on the type of adoption. Foster care, you pay me zero.
Okay.
The City of New York pays the legal fee, and you actually get a subsidy every month until the child is 21 years old.
Okay, but now it's not foster.
Now it's not foster.
It's somebody down the block that you've been taking care of.
Adoption is not inexpensive.
All right.
You have to pay a lawyer for the adoption. If you can't afford one, you can go to a place like NILAG and get free representation. Adoption is not inexpensive. Is it worth it? Of course it's worth it. But yes, you do have to pay.
Doing a mitzvah. All right, where do we find you, by the way?
Greenberg, Bryant, and Blyer just merged with these wonderful matrimonial lawyers, and my number is 212-822-1444.
And you said it's National Adoption Month?
It is National Adoption
So
Month.
adopt a child.
Adopt a child, please.
Please, it's a good thing. And all good stuff, Cliff.
Thank
You'll
you
come
so
back,
much.
right?
I'd love to.
All right. All right, that's all the time we have for tonight. I'd like to thank our guests for joining us, and of course you, the viewers, for watching. If you missed any part of tonight's show, be sure to check it out at www.bronxnet.tv. Also remember, if there is a legal issue or topic you'd like to see on a future edition of Today's Verdict, feel free to contact me at davidlesch@bronxnet.org or tweet us at Today's Verdict, and make sure to hashtag Ask Today's Verdict. For myself and all of us at Today's Verdict, always remember, know your rights, know your issues, have a happy Thanksgiving, and reach a verdict. I'm David Lesch. See you in 2 weeks.
They said I have troll teeth.
That my voice sounded like a possessed baby doll.
That no one would ever love someone as stupid as me.
That I was fat, ugly.
Disgusting.
The effect of bullying is potent.
We will no longer be the silent majority.
Now, when you see online bullying, there's something you can do about it.
We're gonna take action with the I.
I am a witness.
I am a witness.
I am a witness.
I am a witness.
I am a witness, and so are you.